Welcome to Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. My name's Jake. We got a couple of big stories today. I want to end it with the Trump prosecution stuff, because I think that is the thing that we need to take the most action on, and I also believe that's the thing we can do the most about. So let's dive right into it. First up, Matt Schlapp, the guy who puts together CPAC for the Republican Party, a major figure in the Republican Party, he has been accused of sexual assault. A male staffer says that Schlapp grabbed his crotch, apparently, while the staffer was driving Schlapp after a night of drinking. Will not surprise you to hear yet another person in the GOP who's pushing homophobic policies, who invited a bigot to come speak at CPAC about how America could have more bigoted laws against gay people, has, of course, hypocritically assaulted someone of the same gender. Why does that matter? It really doesn't, except to highlight the utter hypocrisy present in this party. We hear about projection a lot. We don't hear as much about the other side of that, which is people who have dime store psychiatrist here, but it's the truth. People who have unresolved feelings, perhaps because they grew up in an environment that is very repressive, pointing to others who appear to have those same feelings and accusing them of poor behavior. This is what a lot of the most vehement conservatives do. And unfortunately, if you have the kind of morals that tell you it's okay to deal with your own homosexual desires by picking on homosexuals, then you also are more likely to have the kind of morals that tell you it's okay to grope somebody without their permission. That is sexual assault. Don't let the specifics fool you. That's just what it is. I was delighted to see that a fellow Michigander who's in this same field here of online news was on top of this story. His name is Jeff Waldorf. I'm a big fan of Waldorf Nation, and I definitely recommend you check it out. He does great commentary, and we've got his video to tell us about this. Let's have a listen.
The Daily Beast's Roger Sullenberger with a bombshell report. Apparently, a former male staffer for Herschel Walker's Senate campaign has accused Republican Matt Schlapp of sexual harassment and groping. So let's get into the details here. Okay. So now, that staffer described Schlapp as giving him a sustained and unwanted and unsolicited sexual contact while he was allegedly driving Schlapp back from an Atlanta bar back in October. So let me say this, right? If this is true, this kind of fits with a history of allegations against Matt Schlapp. Okay, so I wouldn't exactly be surprised if this is the case. And by the way, the staffer seems to have some receipts. So with that, more details.
Very important right there with the receipts. I do not think we would be hearing about this at all without them. It is an unfortunate reality in our country that, particularly when you're dealing with someone who is powerful, such as Mr. Schlapp, the victim is fighting an uphill battle just to be believed. Now, I'll grant that we have to presume innocence, but that fact is taken advantage of entirely too often. That is used as an excuse not to do the hard work of prosecuting a rich person. Let's let Mr. Waldorf continue.
Now, the staffer said that the incident had occurred on the night of October 19th, when Schlapp, chair of the American Conservative Union and the lead organizer for the influential Conservative Political Action Committee, had both allegedly, quote, groped and fondled his crotch in his car against his will after buying him drinks at two different bars. The staffer described Schlapp, who had traveled to Georgia for a Walker campaign event, as inappropriately and repeatedly intruding into his personal space at the bars, and then, of course, in the car, going back to the hotel room, escalated quite a bit.
Jeez.
So, maybe it's a little too late to warn you all, but anybody who is, I guess, triggered by sexual assault, you know, content warning. Okay. So, more details. The staffer also said that he was keenly aware of his power dynamic with Schlapp, widely regarded as one of the most influential figures in national conservative politics. So I think that's really important to mention, right? There is a power dynamic when you have so much influence, when you have so much power, especially, anywhere really in politics, but we're talking about conservative politics here. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of predators, when they have that power, they do feel comfortable enough to do this openly. And they also know that because of that power dynamic, a lot of the victims won't necessarily speak out.
And bear in mind, they also lack the morality. They're in a political party which exists to harm other Americans, either by stealing from them in the form of giving massive tax breaks to people that do not need it for a made-up benefit, which is the theory of trickle-down economics. It's been proved not to work. In fact, the opposite happens. When you give tax breaks to the rich, the poor suffer, because rich people do not have back bills to pay. Rich people, by definition, have an overabundance of money. So they use that money to gain more from themselves. At the best, what they do with their tax breaks is put it in the bank and sit on it. America loses out in that deal. But do not forget that they make scapegoats of people in order to look like they are busy. And unfortunately, that play acting that they have done since the 1800s has become the actual motivation for most of them. Hatred of homosexuals, hatred of minorities of any kind, has become the actual motivator for a lot of these politicians because they grew up listening to the lies. And here we are.
They'll be afraid to do so. And of course, this staffer is absolutely afraid, mainly because of his career in Republican politics. And so, now that said, the Daily Beast noted that they were withholding the staffer's name at his request, citing concerns of drawing attention to himself while embarking on his first weeks in a new job in Republican politics.
We're not going to listen to this whole thing. He does longer form videos, but there's one part I want to get to.
He's in Republican politics, whatever. He decided he's not going to come out publicly. Well, okay, sure. Like,
no, it's understandable.
All right. And he cares more about his job. Well, look, I don't care about his politics. I don't care about his job. He's still a victim. That's what's important here. And he did say that he would come forward if Schlapp denied his claims, which, of course, he's going to come out and, well, deny the claims. But we'll get to that. But we continue with the allegations. Schlapp, the staffer recalled, said that he'd wanted to spend the evening discussing the staffer's professional future.
Yeah.
Quote, it was a public space, and I was thinking that he got the hint. I did not want to embarrass him, but it escalated. So now, after the 2 bars, he drove Schlapp back to his hotel. And then, of course, that's when the alleged fondling had happened. And then when they arrived at the hotel, the staffer said that Schlapp had invited him to his hotel room. The staffer declined and left as quickly as he could.
Good Lord.
He then, the next morning, informed the Walker campaign about what had happened.
This is interesting.
So that's actually also part of the receipts, because they spoke to the Walker campaign, and there was a staffer that said, yes,
and it means
we were aware of these complaints.
People that can testify to.
But we'll get to what they did in response. So now, the receipts. So there are some call logs that this staffer had shared with the Daily Beast, and there were even a couple of videos that were recorded by the staffer detailing in his own words what had happened. And again, those have not been released to the public because right now this staffer is staying anonymous. Okay. So now Schlapp, according to the call logs, had called the staffer after he had returned home. This is slightly after midnight, and spoke to him in a short conversation, after which this staffer then agreed to drive him to another campaign event, even after what had happened. However,
this is the
right after the call, the staffer had broken down and recorded a series of videos detailing that evening, which again he had shared with the publication, as well as 2 people close to him, including the staffer's wife. In the video, he's alleged to have said, quote, "What is wrong with me? This is okay to happen? I don't know what I did. It's very sad that this is okay."
So that, as Jeff Waldorf is getting into, it's a very common reaction to a sexual assault. Blaming oneself, asking, why, what did I do? And also the initial agreement. This happens in all kinds of dramatic, high-pressure situations. If you're not prepared for something intense like that, you don't think it's going to happen to you. And in the case of a sexual assault, of course you don't think it's going to happen to you, or you wouldn't have been in that place and time. You usually don't react the way you imagine you'd react. The kind of thoughts that go through your head are, what if I'm wrong? What if no one believes me? Will I get in more trouble? Will I get in trouble in some way for this? You usually don't act the way you would consider to be honorable. And it doesn't matter what the situation is. It might not even be a sexual assault. It might be you see somebody beating somebody else at a distance, let's say. And most people freeze up and just try to be ignored. Doesn't mean they're a coward. It means they're in the moment unsure of what to do. And so they default to not drawing attention. And it's devastating to hear that a young man trying to get into politics, admittedly on a very misguided side of the tracks here, but still a young man who didn't ask for this in any way, shape, or form, is now having as a major part of his career the obstacle of how to deal with being forced to work with somebody who sexually assaulted him. And just, we know this generally if we watch this video. If you're watching this video, odds are you're already within a culture that has a better understanding of this. But let's just underline it to be absolutely clear. It's got nothing to do with how you dress. It's got nothing to do with how tough you are. Terry Crews was sexually assaulted, and it was incredibly courageous of him to talk about it. There's bad people out there. Turns out a lot of them work in the GOP.
Now, look, that response, it's a trauma response. What did I do to invite this? What did I do to make this happen? Was I not careful enough? Was I not expressive enough that I wasn't interested? That seems like a normal trauma response to me. Okay? And so more quotes here from the videos. Matt Schlapp of the CPAC grabbed my junk and pummeled it at length. I'm not sure I would use that description, but ouch. And I'm sitting there thinking, what the hell is going on? That this person is literally doing this to me. From the bar to the Hilton Garden Inn, he has his hands on me, and I feel so effing dirty. I feel so effing dirty. I'm supposed to pick this MFer up in the morning and just pretend like nothing happened? This is what I'm dealing with. This is what I got to do. Now, again, you listen to that trauma response. And I think that response adds a lot of credibility to the story.
It's hard to hear, man. There's 12 more minutes in that video. I think it's worth watching in its entirety. Just Jeff Waldorf's take on it. He does a great job of breaking this all down. But to sum it up, the Walker campaign staff asked that staffer. First of all, they were very supportive, and it has to be said. I think I can't make assumptions about what their motivations were, but I think in a misguided move, they did this next thing. They asked him to contact Schlapp about what happened. So essentially to confront the man in writing via text and tell him he would not be driving him. Schlapp then wrote back to the staffer several times, asked him to call him, and then went about his career. You should not ever ask somebody who has been assaulted to go confront the person who did it in any way. I would think logic would just tell you that. The people to contact would be the police. I don't know what conversations they had, but the fact that the police were not immediately contacted is disappointing. Walker campaign staff gets a lot of support for being supportive, and yet the police, to my knowledge, were not notified about this. That's unfortunate. But as I say, I don't know the details, bearing in mind this guy also is trying to build his career in GOP politics. And when we're talking about the people who will react in the worst possible way to accusations of sexual assault, siding with the assaulter and in particular, if that person is powerful, that's the GOP through and through. Lindy Lee tweets, Matt Schlapp grabbed the crotch of a male staffer on Herschel Walker's campaign. Kevin McCarthy had an affair, allegedly for that first thing, by the way, and allegedly to everything I said before this. It has not been proved in a court of law, as it has not been given a chance to be. Kevin McCarthy had an affair with a fellow member. Matt Gaetz trafficked teen girls. That I will not say allegedly to, because I am daring that punk to sue me. I would love to have discovery in court. If you can somehow make him aware of this, Matt Gaetz, you engaged in child sex trafficking. Jim Jordan covered up sex crimes. Trump assaulted at least 27 women. These are the sexual deviants leading the GOP. True. Lindy Lee, true. That's who they are. That's the GOP. Want to be clear that the reason they are deviants here is one simple thing. No consent. I take that back. Kevin McCarthy's affair with a fellow member barely belongs up there. It is only that they did not, presumably, have the consent of their spouses. That makes that abhorrent in terms of their morality. But the rest, come on. There's basically one golden rule. Every party involved must consent. No child is capable of giving consent. Therefore, you have these deviants. That is the GOP, folks. Be aware of it. They are not going to change until they are made to change. There's not going to be a moment where they look around and think, "My God, I'm sick of hanging out with criminals, scumbags. I'm sick of sharing company with devils." They're just not. They prefer that company so they can blend in. It has become a party for the absolute worst humans in America. They all but put out a flag advertising it when CPAC, run by Schlapp, hung up a giant banner in lights, literally saying, just going by, literally saying, "We are all domestic terrorists." Does that sound like I'm making that up? Yes, but I'm not making that up. They said that. We are all domestic terrorists. This is who they are. Do not forget. But let's talk about the change coming now. There is a significant change in the way the GOP is talked about and the way Republicans are being dealt with, and that is people are learning to be honest about them, because we can no longer afford to pretend like it's a normal political party. Rusty Bowers was formerly a Republican representative. He is one of the few who actually participated in the January 6th committee. He was a witness because he witnessed crime. Bear in mind that the majority of witnesses called either didn't respond or clung to pleading the fifth, meaning that we will not get resolution on this until it goes through a court of law. But that said, Rusty Bowers deserves credit because he did his part. Here he is on MSNBC explaining why he changed his tune on Trump. Because he initially, following his January 6th testimony, he initially said he would vote for Trump again. Maddeningly. But he stopped saying that, and he deserves credit at least for that. Let's listen.
Today is the anniversary of the January 6th insurrection, a solemn day. The president marking it with a ceremony, even as Congress's troubled start continues to dominate Washington. The DOJ has its own accountability going for the attack, announcing over 950 people have now been charged. The new Congress, of course, is taking over from the first Congress to probe those horrific attacks, fresh off the new extensive report that identifies Trump as the central cause of January 6th. The probe exposing many parts of the plot that were not initially widely known, including the lengths Trump went to demand illegal actions by state officials, many of whom defied him, including Arizona Republican Rusty Bowers, who refused to abuse his power as the state House Speaker on behalf of Trump.
I said, look, you are asking me to do something that is counter to my oath when I swore to the Constitution to uphold it. Anything that would say to me, you have a doubt, deny your oath. I will not do that.
Today, the president honoring Bowers' courage and approach with the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Rusty put his obligation to the Constitution and his country ahead of everything when he refused intense political pressure to decertify the 2020 election results. His courage is probably the reason why he's lost his primary last year. Rusty, you're an example, is a demonstration to every young man and woman thinking about entering politics about what integrity is all about.
Fresh from the White House and that honor, former Speaker Rusty Bowers joins us now. Welcome to the broadcast, sir.
Thanks, Ari. Good to be here.
What does receiving this medal today mean to you?
Oh, I'm hoping the ride is now over. But the antics down the street show that there's still some challenges ahead. But
Understatement.
I think generally the people, it's not that they don't want to continue something bad. They want to continue something solid. They want to be able to depend on government. They can differ. These sides can differ greatly, but you have to maintain the institutional ability to differ.
He's referring
and if you
to the House
don't do
Speaker
it
vote.
right, you don't have an institution. And I'm hoping that they will respect the marvel that's just down the street from where I'm sitting right now.
Yeah, that makes sense when you put it like that. We have been tracking so much of the evidence. You lived through it, and then there's a process by which it's under investigation.
We are going into
I want to ask you about this since I have the benefit of interviewing you for the first time. John Eastman, who was really one of the most extreme or fringe figures trying to overthrow the election, according to your testimony, the evidence in the report, as late as January 4th, was still calling you, urging you to, quote, hold a vote to decertify Arizona's presidential electors. Eastman allegedly saying, quote, just do it and let the court sort it out. Based on your experience.
That right there. I say this so often, and it's painful because it's true. That right there is enough to arrest Eastman. It's a matter of public record now. There's no reason John Eastman should be free right now. No just reason that he should be free right now. We have to start attending to this. Enough.
By Arizona's presidential electors. Eastman allegedly saying, quote, just do it and let the court sort it out. Based on your experience, was it your understanding that Mr. Eastman thought these were unlawful, unconstitutional requests, and he was sort of secretly urging you to do them? Give us your view of it at that time.
I remember the conversations. John wasn't trying, the impetus was, is this legal? What is the legal benefit or the opportunity or the structure that allows you to do such a thing? And because he was respected by counsel and they wanted to find out from him. And as we walked through the conversation, I kept parrying. He would thrust and I would parry. And in the end, we just said, John, has there ever been anybody tried to do this? And he said, no. And I said, then you want me to put my state through this? And he said, just do it and let the courts figure it out. It was that kind of it wasn't like, just do it, Rusty, let the courts do it. He just was like, it didn't mean that much to have the courts do it. And I just said, no. Every one of us along the way, Ari, every one of us has a responsibility. I'm not going to punt it down the road. If it's mine, I got to face it.
Yeah.
And I haven't always been perfect. But so when
we got Tony in the comments saying you deserve way more subs. True. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the new subscriber. I hope you enjoy all this content. On a related note, we got to give credit where it's due, because I would not hesitate to tear into this guy normally, but right here, this is exactly what we need from every politician. There was way back in the day an old saying in politics: the buck stops here. That means if you can take responsibility for something, you do take responsibility for it. He did. A lot of the J6 plan relied on laziness and cowardice. Those two things. Don't fight this. Pass it to somebody else. You keep passing it until we find the link in this chain that will break. In this case, Trump, who appointed a ton of judges, was confident that if he could get this in the courts, enough, not all, but enough, would say that there was something askew, that he could do away with the election. That was more or less the plan. He was just looking for an excuse.
he said that, we said, my counsel and I, no, we're not, thank you for your time. We're not going to do that.
Good man.
Do you think, based on everything we've seen, that someone like Mr. Eastman, Mr. Clark, the aforementioned, Mr. Giuliani, that there should be legal accountability for them based on your vantage point? Yes. I'm not asking you to be a judge, but if you're a witness and you see a mugging in the street, you say, well, I hope they look into it. Hope they arrest that guy. He's still entitled to process. And other times you say, well, they bumped into each other. I don't think it was that. You have a real front row seat. Do you think there should be accountability for, say, any of those people I mentioned?
He knows what politicians do, and I am glad he is making it clear. He's saying, look, you can answer this GD question. We're not asking you, before you say I'm not a prosecutor, we're not asking you to be a prosecutor. Give us your opinion. Still, we're going to get some dancing.
Everybody is accountable, one way or the other. You might be accountable for bad advice. You might be accountable for fraud. There's a difference. And I'm not the prosecutor, and as you said, I'm not the judge. Mm-hmm. But we put a lot of stock in John Eastman because he has a great history. He's a brilliant guy.
And all that. Yeah, I don't know what he was using it for, but yeah.
It floored me. It floored me that he would take this position. And since that time, it's floored me that he would take these positions. So, but as they see fit,
get there.
I can only testify to what he said to me. I know that others have talked to him as well on the subject, or I should say, I'm led to believe that others have. I wasn't part of the conversation. But everybody has to be accountable.
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah.
You are.
Sure.
All right. So to sum it up, that was a weak-willed way of saying yes. Ari Melber asks, should these people be held legally accountable? That's a straightforward question. Rusty Bowers does the thing that is always goddamn done, where he either he feels obligated to say yes for some reason, or to answer correctly for some reason, or he wants to. He genuinely wants to. But he's not brave enough to just say yes. He has to say, everybody should be accountable. Yes is the answer. To sum it up, oh, poor Ari. I'm sorry, Ari.
Yes.
Here we go. Well, there we got it. Yeah, Ari says, should they be held legally accountable? Rusty Bowers takes 3 paragraphs to say yes. If everybody should be, that includes John Eastman.
So the president alluded to your campaign today while honoring you. A lot of people, including President Biden, hold you in high regard. I do want to ask you about the political history here, partly because I was just so personally interested. One of the parts about this job, sometimes you keep reading about Rusty Bowers. I watched your testimony, which was quite impressive. And then I saw, and I'll remind viewers, that around June, after everything you'd said, you publicly said if Trump were the nominee against Biden, you would vote for him again. By July, you said actually you'd never vote for him. I bring this up only, and obviously you could take it, you're a solid guy yourself, to use your word of the day. I bring it up only to get you on the record of when you said that the first time. Is that because even after all this in the Republican Party, that's the level of pressure? Or what do you say about all of that?
No, I think everybody has a defensive mechanism. My vote is sacred to me. Yours is to you. And so typically when people for the last 30 years say, so how are you going to vote on this issue? When they know that I may not be the most happy with my party guy. But I usually just default to the position, hey, if he makes it through the primary, I vote for him. And it was kind of that thing. I got off the plane, I turned a corner, there's the lady with the microphone here. Are you going to vote for me? It wasn't a lot of thought going into that thing. And as I thought afterwards, I should just say, look, don't ask me, because I have an opinion.
Do you remember earlier when we were talking about sexual assault allegations and expanded that to include dramatic moments you're not prepared for and how you usually don't act honorably or what you would consider to be honorably? This is one of the most honest responses I have heard from a politician in general, what Rusty Bowers is saying right now. Now, I'm sure it's influenced in part by the fact that he's out of office. He's no longer running, to my knowledge, for anything. But yeah, he just came out and said it. He's like, that was my default response. That's what I had always prepared to say. The advice I actually give to people, I suppose in another field, is that if you have a reasonable expectation that you're going into a dramatic situation of any sort, think about how you will want to act practically beforehand. Think about realistically how you would want to act. And politicians know frequently they'll be asked when they disagree with the leader of their party, will you still vote for him? And he gave his default response. But as he just pointed out there, he had a moment to think about it after. And he realized, I wish I would have given a different response. And he even then said a practical response he could have given in that same situation, even if he wasn't prepared to say no. The equivalent of it, don't ask me. Don't ask me that question. So, a very interesting bit of insight from Rusty Bowers here. Let's let him finish.
But just don't ask me right now. But on this, I mean, when I sat there by the Secretary of State of Georgia and I heard what he said, and I put it with what I said and put it with what other people said, and since that time, seeing how he acted, this being the former president, I just said, I don't have to try to hide behind some in Mexico they call it a dicho. I don't have to hide behind that. I can just say it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to vote for that guy.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. That's why
it is.
That's why we asked. I wanted to know. I'm running over on time. I'll give you 30 seconds. The last question I have for you, a lot of people watched you. Like I said, a lot of people took a lot from how you comported yourself, your testimony, the president honoring you today. My last question for you is simple. Are you optimistic about this American experiment right now or less so?
Interesting.
What's my alternative? anywhere on earth, anywhere else. It's not we the people. And as long as the people will take the time to inform themselves honestly and will remember where we came from and what we've been through, go have a legislature in Mariupol. See how that goes. Try Donetsk. I don't want to be there. And so I have to be optimistic, and I am. There is so much good in America. We are a strong country if we choose to be.
So where I have to disagree with Rusty Bowers is if you stop and think about that last comment for even a moment. What do you mean anywhere else in the world it's not we the people? Is it phrased like that anywhere else in the world? Probably not. Canada, England, France. There's tons of countries where you vote, you have rights, you decide who your leader is. That's the modern way most countries operate. There is indeed still royalty in England, but they have a parliamentary system, and the royalty they have is a figurehead. It's silly, frankly. It's silly to think, well, only America is the place where there's freedom. No, there's tons of places in the world that are free. That said, I think you can be optimistic about America while still being realistic. If optimism is ultimately just the belief that things can go well, not necessarily that they will. Things can go well, but only if we act, we the people. Bernie Sanders recently put out a video saying some truth, frankly, which is that major change in America has never come from the top down. It has come from the bottom up. It has begun with grassroots movements of millions of people. And I will tell you, that is the purpose of this channel, its existence. Not simply to get people out marching in the streets, although when the time comes for such a thing, maybe we help organize those. But more practically than that, it is to take advantage of the tools that are available to us in 2023. It is possible for us to have a massive effect on politics. Use emails, use phone calls. Those millions and millions of people are generally not activated by just one person making millions and millions of phone calls. It's a handful of people calling their local representative and telling them to get to work doing the hard stuff. That's what they're paid for. If it sounds like the sort of thing that is too big of a job to do in your free time, you're right, it is. There's someone you're already paying right now to do that job for you. That's your representative. That is why we so often include the contact link for your representative, or rather how to find them. Sam Cedar recently, and we did a whole video on this, talked about how effective 5 or 6 phone calls can be. Just get 5 or 6 people to contact the same representative in the span of a week, and you will very likely see that representative out next week talking about the issue you were calling about. It is truly that effective. We can be a powerful political force. We can start holding the rich accountable. We can get big money out of politics. We can build the America that you imagine when you're optimistic about America. But we can't do nothing. Hence, what you can do. Speaking of, we're going into our 3rd year, folks. Our 3rd year without Trump being held accountable. Eastman hasn't been charged. Trump hasn't been charged. Bannon hasn't been charged. The evidence just available to the public has been well beyond what is necessary to prosecute Donald J. Trump for insurrection. Let us not forget the Mueller report. Remember that? Doesn't that seem like ancient history? It was 2019. It was 2019. Feels like forever ago. And yet, Robert Mueller said there was nothing stopping prosecutors from filing charges the moment Trump left office. And the world just sort of forgot about it because, as we talk about on this show nearly every day, this is how cover-ups happen. The information isn't hidden from you, it's given to you. And then they say it takes a long time to do an investigation. Seems to go real quick when the person doing the crime is poor, or when the people who had the crime done to them are rich. But they say, no. This is a big deal. We're taking it seriously. And so this is going to take years to investigate. And they know you will forget about it. A couple years go by, and they do a quick announcement saying, we're not filing charges for X, Y, and Z silly reason. That's what happens. Americans are catching on to this. Here is Jaime Raskin on MSNBC. Again, MSNBC impressing me lately. By the way, if I didn't say it earlier, that was Ari Melber. He's been doing better and better. I'm impressed with him. But this is Jaime Raskin on MSNBC talking about the House vote as it was happening, some of the people who were allowed to be there voting instead of a prison cell, and, oh yeah, that little thing called the Mueller report, which we seem to have just forgotten about.
Joining us now is Congressman Jaime Raskin, Democrat of Maryland. He was a member of the January 6th committee and will be the ranking member on the Oversight Committee should the 118th Congress ever get to work. Congressman, thank you for joining us tonight. I wonder how you look upon the events that have unfolded in the course of the last few days and the fact that here we sit on January 6th, 2023.
Well, it's hard for me not to view it in the context of what happened 2 years ago today. Kevin McCarthy, who originally, cried about what was taking place, and rightfully so, attacking Donald Trump, quickly withdrew his criticism and then pandered to the pro-insurrectionist part of the Republican Party and helped to whitewash and cover up what had taken place. And that was a signal to the extremist elements within the Republican Party that there was nothing that Kevin McCarthy wouldn't do in order to achieve power within the GOP caucus. And so
So I just want to highlight that real quick. He's careful to call them insurrectionists. That is what they are. They shouldn't be there. They should be in a prison cell right now. He also was talking about Kevin McCarthy. If you're not familiar with what he was referencing, Kevin McCarthy after January 6th, do you remember those couple of days where Republicans sort of were lying low and not doing their normal obnoxious behavior? Kind of seemed to sober up a little bit. In that time, Kevin McCarthy gave a speech. Donald Trump should have sent out a tweet immediately. He should have called his supporters back. He gave a fiery speech saying what was obvious to everyone, signaling perhaps that the GOP was going to suddenly pretend like they cared about the law again. But you know what happened? No arrests were made. I remember America just a couple of years back. We thought any moment, black vans are going to pull up to Trump's residence. Any moment, at least, some of these psychos, maybe Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to get carted off in handcuffs. We're just waiting because we all saw what they did on national television. Didn't happen. Trump leaves the White House after handing over in a ceremony that he wasn't invited to, actually, handing over the keys, so to speak, to Joe Biden, being made to. And it was clear, oh my God, no one powerful will get arrested for this. So what did McCarthy do? Well, he went down to Mar-a-Lago as the de facto leader of Republicans. Kevin McCarthy went down to Mar-a-Lago, took a picture with Trump, and essentially showed the world, look, we're still on his side after the sedition, after trying to undo democracy in this country. That is what Kevin McCarthy did.
He has moved steadily to the right, and he has capitulated at every turn.
I gotta just say it. For the record, that's giving aid and comfort. If Trump is guilty of a sedition, then Kevin McCarthy gave aid and comfort to someone who is guilty of sedition. And he also, Mr. Speaker of the House, he also must be considered unfit to hold public office. We have a rule about that. There should be a purge of GOP politicians, and it is not the fault of Democrats. It is the fault of GOP politicians. Don't break the law if you don't want to get arrested. We need to insist that the law is upheld. Let's let him continue before I get too much on my high horse.
To these extremist elements within the GOP. And that's what makes this such a scary moment in terms of the precipice of the 118th Congress, because there are a lot of things where he has just completely given the keys of power away to the most fanatical parts of his caucus and, essentially giving a one-member veto to the most extreme members of the caucus means that we are going to have a series of drag-down battles on things like the debt limit, shutting down the government, and so on. But to my mind, this is all part of the implosion of the Republican Party as they continue to cater to these fanatical forces that we saw on full display 2 years ago tonight.
Pausing very quickly to read a comment. Lawrence says, don't wait for the DOJ to solve a political problem. Print the voting record of your local representative and share it in your neighborhood. I do think, so let's start off with just that last part. That is a fantastic idea. I think you just came up with a segment I'm doing in the very next show. That is a great idea. I will try to find a way to make it easy to find the voting record so that you can print it off. But I would be hard-pressed to think of a better way to wake up Americans that need to wake up about this. Fantastic. As for not waiting for the DOJ, I also agree, but that doesn't mean ignore the DOJ. That means you need to contact the DOJ. Frankly, at the end of the day, it won't matter. It just won't matter what else we do if the law does not apply equally to politicians as it does to us. Because what we do will be ignored. As we came this close to who we vote for being ignored. Already, gerrymandering is making it so that the person who the most people vote for in the country is not necessarily the president. The person who that's the Electoral College. But gerrymandering is making it so that the person who gets the most votes is not necessarily your representation reflected on a statewide scale. So it will not be enough to be very engaged in the legislative side. We have to be engaged with the Justice Department as well. In most streams, because I talk about this in most streams, there is a contact link for the Justice Department. They need to know you see them. I've included a script in this stream as well. You can use that if you need inspiration for what to say. When I first started contacting these people, I do it about once a day. I contact somebody about something, following, by the way, the pattern that right-wingers follow. If you wonder how they have such a firm hold on power in America, the most extreme group of us that are in the minority, that's how. They're active at a local level, and they are active in terms of contacting these people. Contact them. When I got started, I used a script because I didn't have the language yet for what I wanted to say. Feel free to use that. Feel free to change that so it suits what you actually mean. But do contact them, and oh boy, have we got the picture put forth very clearly by a couple of people here, including Representative Ruben Gallego. But let's let Raskin finish.
There's the fox in the henhouse quality to all of this. It was one thing to have election deniers in Congress. Now we're talking about election deniers chairing committees or subcommittees, really at the upper echelons of power in Congress. I mean, what are the implications for the 2024 presidential election?
Also, having them heading the ethics committee. Think about that. The ethics committee, which will be responsible for investigating George Santos. Do you really trust the MAGA wing to do anything about George Santos?
To have,
they shouldn't be
as
there.
you
They
point
should be in a
out,
jail
election
cell.
deniers one step
At the very
away from
least,
ousting the
barred
Speaker of
from
the
public
House.
office.
Can they fool around with election certification come 2024? I mean, what practically are the implications of the concessions that Kevin McCarthy has made to this group of people?
Well, look, they've shown on January 6, 2021 and January 6, 2023, there's nothing that they won't do. They are a rule or ruin faction. And the way that the radical Republicans, who are obviously a very different breed than these Republicans, dealt with it after the Civil War was they built into the Constitution in Section 3 of the 14th Amendment a statement that if you swear an oath of office to uphold the Constitution and you betray the oath by engaging in insurrection or rebellion, you can never hold office again. And the history of that provision is fascinating because the Republicans wanted to go further and just disenfranchise anybody who participated in the Confederacy. And when it got over to the Senate said, well, that goes too far. Let's just focus on the most hardcore element, those people who had sworn an oath to the Constitution but violated it. And we'll make sure they can still vote, but they can never serve in office again. And so I think that's a provision that the country has got to be taking seriously in the days ahead, as the January 6th committee urged in our final recommendations.
When you
talk about there we go. I've said it before. I'm going to say it again, and I'll be quick. The laws we have currently are insufficient. But even those insufficient laws that we have, rules that we have, policies that we have, they're not used. They are not used. They're written down. We don't do them. Certainly not when a Republican does something wrong. We just do not hold Republicans to account. And this is a cultural problem. The left has a culture of being passive. We have a culture of being entirely too trusting of our officials to actually have our interests in mind. They do not. They've demonstrated this time and time again. Some, sure, not enough. And when they are doing their job well, they don't hear from us saying, good job. We are a silent majority, and that has to end. Step one in getting our country back on track is us finding our voice. It certainly doesn't just mean something like this, where it's you and I talking back and forth. It is us organizing politically. And that doesn't mean going out and doing a big march. That doesn't mean taking a whole day to do X, Y, or Z. That means writing your representative, calling your representative. You have one vote, and an infinite number of phone calls, an infinite number of emails that you can make. I don't even suggest you write all that many, but a couple of times, a couple of phone calls, especially now in 2023, where you will be shaping how people campaign in 2024, letting them know what their constituents think. Now is the time. DOJ as well as your representative.
January 6th committee. I mean, they have shown, this group of folks, these incoming Republicans who are taking the majority, have shown every indication and inclination that they want to have their own kind of bizarro version of the January 6th committee, an investigation to weaponize the federal government. They seem to have the funding locked down for that. They have their sights set on people who worked on the committee, who may have been sources to the committee. How concerned are you about the security of those who, in many ways, risked their careers, if not their lives, testifying against the former president and his allies who tried to steal the election?
Let's keep it playing.
Well, the first point about that, Alex, is that they will not revisit the findings of the January 6th committee because the people that they would call as witnesses, i.e. the members of the Trump administration, the Trump White House, the Trump family, all testified, and they all told the same story, which was Donald Trump simply refused to take no for an answer from the American people and set about to overturn a presidential election, all the way to the point of inciting a violent mob to storm the Congress of the United States and attack his own vice president. So they're not going down that road, but you're right that they will try to cook something up about the Department of Justice, and already they're completely failed allegations about Russiagate, which...
Okay, so why? Why do they do that? If they know it's not going to go anywhere, if they know that they can't actually make a court case, if they know it's nonsense, essentially, why would they do that? Because they want to, as we mentioned earlier, make their evil blend in. They want to cause chaos. They want to do a big committee and try to get as many headlines as they can about that committee. And what will Americans see? Not just you, who follows this closely and can probably tell the difference between this one and the January 6th committee. How about the guy in line checking out at a Denny's who only gets the news from reading the subtitles on Fox over the shoulder of the cashier? That person will see there were two committees when they do their committee. One was a Democrat-run committee, even though it wasn't really. And one was run by the Republicans. And both got a lot of headlines and talked a lot about boring stuff to this person. And neither resulted in criminal charges. It's going to work. If the DOJ doesn't actually act, which I have seen no sign that they're going to. I'd love to find out that tomorrow the big bust happens on a Sunday. But there's no sign of that. Merrick Garland is showing every sign of being exactly like every other attorney general America has ever had, and letting the powerful go. And when the average American sees that a Democrat majority did one committee that seemed like a big deal and made a lot of waves, and then the Republican majority did a bunch of committees accusing of all kinds of serious sounding things unless you actually stop and think about it, bearing in mind they won't stop and think about it. And that neither resulted in a politician getting arrested, a powerful person actually being held to account. They will then assume that it's all nonsense, and this is just how politicians are. That will be the conclusion, and it will be a reasonable conclusion. You shouldn't be required to follow all of this. I'm glad you do. I genuinely am. You're why there is a possibility that America pulls out of this. But again, not if we don't act. It will not be enough for us to hope that people come to their senses, or to hope that this is too big for the Justice Department to ignore. The Justice Department ignored the Chenault affair with Nixon, even though we knew about it at a federal level. They ignored the Iran-Contra affair with both Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. The Justice Department ignored the fact that George W. Bush lied to the American people about Iraq having weapons of mass destruction. He had intelligence saying the opposite. Where is he now? Painting. Going to baseball games with Ellen. 7,000 Americans died. 20 years of war. 8,000 contractors died. Around, it's estimated, 300,000 Iraqis, many of them civilians. Who got Osama bin Laden, orchestrator of 9/11? Barack Obama. But he only gets partial credit because he said it was time to move on and to yet again give a powerful Republican politician a pass on a crime. So no, if they get the opportunity, no, the Justice Department will not go after Trump. He took top secret, classified documents. That's an open and shut case. He admitted it on social media. Doesn't matter the context in which he took them. He was not the president. He was a private citizen. According to the law, not some silly policy, but the actual law, which is all that ought to matter. He was a private citizen. He took classified documents. SCI documents. That's like nuclear secrets level. We don't know that we have them all back. For that alone, prison. It's an open and shut case.
They think people are listening to, but they're not. Everybody understands that Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump are aligned as an axis of autocratic and plutocratic power on earth, and they're all trying to overthrow democracy. So if that's what they want to do, if they want to have that conversation, great, because we'd love to talk about Vladimir Putin's filthy imperialist invasion of Ukraine, his attack on democracy in Ukraine, and indeed his attack on democracy all over the world as he tries to undermine democratic parties, democratic movements, and democratic constitutions.
Congressman Raskin, I think of you as the poet laureate of the House. And as such, I wonder if you could put into context this moment as compared to Election Day 2022, when Democrats were feeling very good about the American public offering a fairly resounding vote in favor of democracy and staving off this slide that seemed at one point inexorable towards anti-democratic forces, if not outright autocracy. Couple that with the events of the last 4 days, where the Republican would-be Speaker of the House is catering to a radical fringe that seems intent indeed on cementing anti-democratic forces inside the lower
I got to pause it
chamber.
again. Who was leading that group? Not that I ever complain about McCarthy suffering, but who was leading that group? Matt Gaetz, who appears to have engaged in child sex trafficking. His buddy Joel Greenberg got arrested for that exact activity. He says Gaetz was with him. Prosecutors say, we can't trust our witnesses. Who are their witnesses? Greenberg, who they gave a deal to in order to snitch on Gaetz. So why give him the deal if if his word wasn't gonna be taken into account? And the victim. Victim says Gaetz was there. Should have been under arrest. He's a Republican politician in Florida. So he was not. It should get under your skin that he's just walking around free right now. It does for me, certainly.
Well, look, the Democrats, we have a tough job because we've got to do two things. One is we have to refute and debunk all of the lies, the disinformation, the propaganda, the conspiracy theories, the scandals du jour, and honor the facts. And so we have to be a truth squad for America. But then even more importantly, we have to keep America moving forward. We've got to stay on track in terms of investment in infrastructure, in lowering healthcare and prescription drug costs. We've got to be meeting the needs of the American people. But the great news is that the Democratic Party post Donald Trump is a very different party than before Donald Trump. We are battle hardened. We are veterans of all of their propaganda and disinformation and nonsense. We know how to take them on. And the people in the Democratic caucus who've hung together 212-0, ballot after ballot for Hakeem Jeffries, from our most conservative elements to our most progressive elements, the people who've hung together. We are blood brothers and sisters in this struggle to defend American democracy and American freedom. And we are backed by the vast majority of the American people all over the country. And we know that what we're up against is a minority party, a shrinking minority party, increasingly shrill, increasingly cultish in their ways, but they do have control over certain anti-democratic practices like voter suppression, and they manipulate the Electoral College, and they use gerrymandering to their advantage, and so on. So it's a race between the democratic will of the vast majority of the people and these anti-democratic practices that are just barely keeping the GOP alive today.
Let's not forget the DOJ.
Well, I think a lot of people watch what is happening, and you have the enthusiasm and the support and the admiration of a lot of parts of the country, which I still believe is a majority of America. Congressman Jaime Raskin, once more into the breach, Democrat from Maryland and former member of the January 6th committee. Thank you for making time tonight, especially before the House has to go vote again at the top of the hour. May this end soon. Good luck to you, sir.
And it was ultimately a vote for McCarthy. After quite a struggle. So, as I say, it's on us. It is on us to put pressure on the Department of Justice. And fortunately, it's rather easy to do. We're just not used to doing it. We don't have a culture of doing this, so it seems strange to us. It seems like we're going to get put on a list if we write an email to the DOJ. Well, you will. You'll be put as citizen number yada, 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 yada. And you'll be put on a board that has tick marks by it. And that board has tick marks about issues that have been brought up in phone calls and emails. So our goal should be to, because we outnumber them, and we can do this if we just learn to do it, should be to outnumber the Republicans who do this. Because I promise you, there is on that board, Hunter Biden's laptop has let's say 30 tick marks from the craziest of the crazy who actually have actually fallen for the conspiracy theories and actually think the Department of Justice will find something. We, however, have an advantage. Aside from our numbers, we're right. We have seen the crimes. We need to tell the Department of Justice to do their job. Fortunately, we're not alone. As Jaime Raskin pointed out there, Democrats are getting smarter. They're learning to do their effing jobs. Here is Democratic Representative Ruben Gallego talking about something that is long overdue. He tears into Attorney General Merrick Garland. This is from Politico. Democratic Representative Ruben Gallego tore into Attorney General Merrick Garland on Tuesday over his department's handling of cases related to last year's attack on the Capitol. I think Merrick Garland has been extremely weak, and I think there should be a lot more of the organizers of January 6th that should be arrested by now, Gallego said in an interview on CNN. Stand by. said in an interview on CNN. The Arizona congressman, a retired Marine who sheltered reporters in his office during the January 6th riots, by the way, very admirable of him, called Garland feckless and said he has not been helpful in terms of preserving our democracy. Yeah, literally that. The fact that he was unable to make arrests of political figures before 2022, guess what? We lost the House majority. Many of those figures, particularly being new to politics because they are from the MAGA extremist wing, many of them are in the House of Representatives. They wouldn't be there. They would not be there if Garland had done his job. Democrats lost the House majority because Merrick Garland failed to do his job. That is a statement of fact. The Justice Department did not immediately respond to a request to comment on Gallego's criticisms. Of course, they are cowards. More than 700 people have been arrested in connection to the events surrounding the insurrection that took place nearly a year ago. This was significantly longer now. Nearly a year ago to date, more than 150 have pleaded guilty and dozens have been sentenced, largely for misdemeanor crimes. Does that seem sufficient to you? Misdemeanors. That was a rebellion. That was a coup. We're being laughed at around the world. And it might be more accurate to say cried for. Because of this guy right here. With his third grader getting a school picture smile. That guy collects a paycheck. You pay for it. And in exchange for that paycheck, he has been happy to keep you in danger. Do not forget, Trump's crimes are so many that we actually lose track of them. In the public consciousness, we lose track of them. Don't forget, he appears to have engaged in illegality regarding Russia's interference in the 2016 election. It was concluded by the Mueller report that Russia did interfere in the 2016 election. Their goal, to create political unrest in America. That's exactly what they did. In other words, we were attacked by Russia. It was successful. And those who worked with them have not been held to account because they are powerful Republican politicians. Mueller's report detailed, says Politico, extraordinary efforts by Trump to abuse his power as president to undermine Mueller's investigation. Obstruction of justice, that's called. The case is so detailed that it is hard to escape the conclusion that Mueller could have indicted and convicted Trump for obstruction of justice if he were permitted to do so. Pause. Permitted by what? Law or policy? Because you have to follow the law and you do not have to follow policy. That is the point of policy, as opposed to it being a law. The policy exists as such because it's the standard practice. That's the reason why the IRS, former head of the IRS, Chris Reddick, is not himself in prison right now, because it was the policy to audit the president, their taxes every year, and he decided not to follow it. It's not illegal to break policy. And the reason he is not permitted to do so is very clear. Department of Justice policy, this is an article from 2019, prohibits the indictment of a sitting president. So again, he did not have to follow that policy. He chose cowardice. He chose to pass the buck. As a result, it is now 2023. few days ago, Donald Trump threatened the election workers that were caught on camera in the nefarious act of handing a mother to her daughter. We're letting them have free shots at democracy. They're counting on our obedience. Well, they get their aim right. Prove them wrong. You don't have to do anything all that drastic. There is a contact link in the description of this video. Use it. There is a script you can follow in the description of this video. Use it if you feel that it reflects your feelings. If you don't, say whatever you mean to say. I've included it as an example. That's what I feel. But that script, that's all you got to say in the email. That's it. Your brief thoughts on what you want to happen. What I'm advocating for here and now is to tell the Justice Department to get to work. I understand that Jack Smith has his own investigation on January 6th. Okay, there's a lot of other things Trump could and should be arrested for. They pretend like they have to pick one. That's nonsense. If you rob a bank and you're caught on camera doing so, and then somebody is found dead in your house with knife wounds, they can arrest you for the bank robbery before they figure out who killed that person in your house. Never would it cross a prosecutor's mind not to arrest you for the bank robbery while investigating the murder. Yet they pretend like Trump cannot possibly be held to account for any of these other things because we're working on this January 6th investigation. That's nonsense. He should be, at a minimum, in jail presently, awaiting trial. He has demonstrated that he is dangerous and will engage in stochastic terrorism if he is left out. If you're worried that you contacting the Department of Justice, even 1,000 of us contacting the Department of Justice, is not enough, so am I. Contact your representative. Tell them you want them saying this publicly. As a whole, we need to be putting pressure on the Justice Department. We need to make it clear that in American culture, from this point on, we will have one justice system, one justice for all, and that the days of a two-tiered justice system, where average folks have to obey the law, and rich folks, and particularly conservatives, get to choose when they feel like obeying the law. That's over. The good news is it takes less than you think. It really does. Your representative will likely get less than a dozen phone calls in a year. They will likely get maybe 2 or 3 dozen emails. Very few people take advantage of this, which means if you start taking advantage of it, you will have a huge impact on local politics. And that impact on local politics snowballs. Suddenly a representative saying it's time to arrest this guy. That will make headlines. Other representatives will start saying it. It does work like that. It can work like that. So take advantage of it. They say you need millions for a grassroots effort to work. I'm fond of saying, let's count to 1 million. 1. That's you. I'll be 2. Maybe a couple other people watching the stream will be 3, 4, 5, 6. We'll get there. But not standing still. You do have the power. And I believe you have the will as well. This has been Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. My name's Jake.